Hey everybody, welcome back to Coffee with Josh. I have my coffee here. Hope you have yours as well. Let's dive right in. We are going to be talking about the NCTSN's, or the National Child Traumatic Stress Network's 12 core concepts for in working with and understanding kids who have experienced trauma and adverse childhood experiences. The first thing is that it's both an objective and a subjective experience, right? So objectively, we can say a child has been in a car accident. They have experienced abuse or neglect. But subjectively, it's that person's interpretation, that person's understanding, that person's belief system and meaning making behind what happened. It's really a lot to do with their internal working model, how they see themselves, how they see the world, how they interpret that experience that they have. That's just as important, maybe even more important than my saying, yes, it was abuse, or that it was a trauma or not. So really thinking about understanding, and being curious and wondering about our client's experience and their perception of that experience. The next thing is that clients and children, youth, may experience a wide range of thoughts and feelings related to that experience. Their behaviors may look very different. So we can't just put a label on it as trauma, and we know how this particular child is going to react. Or that just because we're seeing behaviors doesn't mean that it is or is not trauma. Again, it's really going back to that place of being curious and wondering and truly trying to understand their story and having that empathy, that compassion of being able to put ourselves in their shoes and trying to understand what was it really like for them. And then the last thing is that, a child's response and reaction to a trauma exposure or adverse childhood experience is also going to be really linked to other experiences they've had, other trauma exposures they've had, and their developmental, where they're at developmentally. And so we have to take those things into account, and that, is this the first trauma exposure, or is this just another trauma exposure that's going to now have a compounding effect? Is this a child who is 3 years old and is still growing rapidly, moving through the developmental milestones, and how might this trauma exposure impact that developmental process? Or is this a child who their first exposure is at 14 and they've had kind of a normal support and loving caregivers, that those factors that build resiliency within the child, and understanding that exposure for that 14-year-old might be very different because they've had very supportive, nurturing experiences that have